I've played against the best, I've won on the biggest stage. But what if I told you, it's not just about luck or talent. It's about using the right tools. GTO Wizard is the fastest and most efficient way to study any spot in poker. This is how you level up your game. This is how you unlock your potential. Don't get left behind. Get GTO Wizard today. Beat the best, crush the rest. What's up, fellow wizards? Today we're going to be looking at a final table ICM concept, overbet shoving on the flop. So, today I want to have a look at a concept that is fairly new and that you don't really see too much in today's games, not even in high-stakes games by very good players. But with the advent of GTO Wizard ICM Postflop AI solver, I suspect that in a year or two, we are going to see a lot of this play happening, especially at the higher stakes. Alright, so what is the concept exactly? Well, if you run a lot of Postflop ICM spots, you will begin to see that the solver often wants to end the action already right there on the flop. It doesn't want to open itself up for either getting check raised and face a difficult decision on the flop, or have the turn bring a quote-unquote scary card. Today, I want to explore this topic to try to understand exactly when this happens most frequently and why. I also want to try to find a few nice heuristics that we can easily remember and implement in-game when we are faced with such a scenario. Alright, so today we're going to be looking at a few final table spots where we are overbet jamming the flop. And this video is not meant to cover extensively every spot where this happens or why or when. It's simply not a long enough video. It's simply to get you curious about the topic so you can do a bit of digging and investigating yourself and just be aware that this is something that happens in solver land and that you should investigate further yourself. So I'm going to bring up like a few different spots where this happens, and then from there you can do some digging yourself. So we're going to be looking at in-position jamming in a single raised pot, button versus big blind. Very common scenario, of course. We're going to be looking at out-of-position jamming in single raised pot, low jack versus cutoff. We're going to be looking at in-position and out-of-position jamming in 3-bet pot, cutoff versus button. And we're going to be looking at lead jamming from the big blind after defending versus a button open, both covered and covering. All right, so first board we're going to look at is 9-7-4 flush draw, button versus big blind. Let's have a look at risk premiums. First of all, I think that's a good place to start always. We can see that the big blind here has 6.2% risk premium and the button has 12.2. So relatively low for the big blind, relatively high for the button, twice as big for the button here, which makes sense. He's covered by a lot and there are some short stacks at the table. Let's have a look at the button strategy here. We can see that he's playing two sizings. He's playing pot and he's playing all in for 3.4 times pot almost. Preferred sizing, all in. Just end the hand right now. Give me the pot. Very interesting to see. And what hands are we using in this all-in range? Let's have a quick look. Firstly, like the value range, it's kind of intuitive in this spot, I think. We're using the biggest top pairs, ace-9, king-9, offsuit and suited. And we're using the first over pairs, the most vulnerable over pairs, pocket tens, pocket jacks, pocket queens. I think what's less intuitive in this spot is where do we draw the bluffs from? It's kind of easy to assume that we're going to be using hands like 10-8, for example, open-ender, which we can see is pure checking, or hands like flush draws, like king 5 of spades, for example, would be an intuitive one since you're putting so much money into the pot. But we can see king 5 of spades, also just pure checking. King 6 of spades, sometimes betting, but never jamming. So what hands are we using? We're using ace 10 offsuit a lot. We're using king 10 offsuit, king jack offsuit, queen jack offsuit, queen 10 offsuit. We're using a lot of over cards that share cards with the value range. Queen 10 off, very good example. Sharing cards with pocket queens and pocket tens. And why are we using these hands instead of our big draws? I think it's going to become apparent when we look at the big blind's calling range. So let's do that. We jam and he has to fold 84% of hands. He has to fold even some top pairs here. We can see he's folding 10-9 sometimes, jack-9 sometimes, Queen 9 a lot. Why is he folding Queen 9 more than Jack 9 and 10 9? Because of backdoor straight equity with these hands, of course. He's also folding big draws like Queen 6 of spades, Jack 6 of spades. Very big hands here that has to hit the muck. 10 6 of spades is going to call because it's a combo draw, has enough equity. But yeah, a lot of really strong hands straight into the muck here. So very interesting to see. All right, so next spot I'm going to look at is this one here. It's also a single raise pot, but we're out of position this time. We're opening from the low jack of 22 bigs, and the cutoff has flatted off 63 bigs. So again, let's have a look at risk premiums to begin with. Here, the low jack has very high risk premium, 14%. Cutoff, not so much, almost 5%. He has a very big stack, so low jack can't really do that much damage to him. We can see that low jack here mostly prefers to just take the pot down right now. 3x pot, all in. Again, kind of similar concept as before, kind of intuitive hands we're using here. We're using our best top pairs, ace jack suited, ace jack offsuit, first overpair, pocket queens, and then we're using overcard hands like ace queen more than, for example, a nut flush draw. We can see like ace 7 suited, nut flush draw, just checks always pretty much. Ace queen offsuit, pretty much always just wants to go all in. King queen offsuit, all in. So again, let's see what's happening here. Why do we want to just go all in with, for example, ace queen offsuit? Here is the reason. We go all in with ace queen offsuit and we get some really nice mega master effects. For example, we get called by ace 9 of spades, ace 8 of spades, ace 7 of spades, hands that we have dominated. And at the same time, we fold him off ace 10, king 10, queen 10, even hands as strong as king jack here. King jack offsuit, mostly just in the bin. So again, very nice mega master effects. So next couple of spots I'm going to be looking at is 3-bet pot, cutoff versus button. We're going to be using this sim right here, average stack 25. We have opened off 36. The button has 3-bet us of 27. All right, first spot we're going to look at is 10-9-7 flush draw. Let's again have a look at bubble factors to begin. Pretty high risk premium here for both players. Cutoff has 9.4, button has 12.4. So kind of similar and reasonably high for both players. We can see that once it checks to the button here, we almost exclusively want to go all in once we put money into the pot. We do some B40 as well, but mostly we just want to jam for 2.2x pot. And in this spot, it's going to be a bit different in terms of what hands we want to use compared to the previous sims. We can see that we're using Jack 10 suited a lot. We're using Ace 10 off quite a bit. And for the overpairs, we're actually not using the first overpairs, which would be queens and jacks, but we're using kings and aces. And if we look at his calling range, it's going to be apparent why we do this. It's because he still has queens and jacks in his range. So first of all, jamming kings and aces becomes better because we get called by queens and jacks. And also jacks need a bit less protection on this board because it has a gut shot and it's a bit more connected to the board. So yeah, a bit less interactivity. Jamming jacks becomes less attractive when you have interactivity with a board like this and when you get called by queens, right? So yeah, that's what's going on there. For the next hand, we're going to look at the same sim, same preflop sim. I'm just going to change the board slightly. We're going to look at Jack 10-7 instead of 10-9-7 flush draw. And we're going to see in this one that actually both out of position and in position prefers playing a lot of jams. This is kind of a spot where first player who jams gets a lot of positive results from doing that. So we can see the hands we want to jam as out of position here is hands like 10-9 suited. So some like Mega Mastery hand like 10-9 suited, 10-8 suited. We're jamming some big draws like King-9 suited. We're also jamming like Ace-Queen, King-Queen. And we can see what happens when we jam here out of position and what button gets to call. Button has to fold some really counterintuitive stuff here. We can see that even pocket queens, not super happy about calling, and at a low frequency, it has to fold. But ace-jack off, mostly just out. If you have the ace of spades, that helps a lot for the added equity. But ace-jack off without a spade, mostly just out. King-jack calls more because it has a backdoor straight draw. Same with queen-jack. But yeah, we get to fold him off like hands like 9s, 8, top pair, open-enders, king, queen, ace, king in the bin. And if we check instead of jamming, he also plays a lot of all-in with some of these hands that we get him to fold by jamming ourselves. We get him to fold ace-8 hands, of course, which will now jam. We get him to fold king-queen, ace-king. So a lot of these hands that he jams, we get to fold. And when he jams now, we have to start folding a lot of the hands that we were jamming before. Hands like 10-9 suited, 10-8 suited, ace-queen, king-queen, even ace-jack off. Stuff that we were jamming that now has to fold. We even have to fold pocket queens at a decent clip here. So it's an interesting spot where basically first person to jam gets a lot of fold equity. So by lead jamming the flop as the cutoff here, we basically steal the fold equity from the button player, which is kind of a cool concept, I think. All right, so last couple of spots we're going to be looking at is big blind defending, both as covering stack and covered. First one we'll be looking at is this one, very shallow final table, average stack 20 big blinds. Button is opening off 16 into 14 and 24. All right, so first of all, let's have a look at this one. 7-6-5 flush draw, very good board for the big blind, of course. We can have a look at the risk premiums again, and we can see for the big blind here, 8%, for the button, 12%. So quite a lot higher for the button, but reasonable risk premium for both players. Big blind actually lead jams for 2.5 times pot, almost a third of the time here. A lot of the hands that he's using are going to be combo draws like a queen 4 of spades, even queen 4 with no spade. Simply just an open-ender. It's going to be using a lot of stuff down here, like pair and straight draw type stuff. He's also going to be using just overcard stuff like Jack 9 with a Jack of spades, for example. Not so intuitive to find these ones, I think. These open-enders, kind of easy to find. Some like ace 10 off with the ace of spades, another like kind of counterintuitive one, but one that has like really nice Megamaster effects. We can have a look at what hands the button is calling here and why ace 10 off with ace of spades is a good jam. So if we jam ace 10 off, we, for example, get called by ace 8 off and ace 9 suited, which is kind of cool. We get called by some of these like combo draws and stuff like that. So we get called by some of those hands, but we also fold out a lot of hands that we are behind. You see, he even has to fold like top pair. And we can see that hands like ace 7 off here. Ace 7 off without the ace of spades is mostly just in the bin. If we're folding him off top pair, top kicker, while getting called by some open-enders and flush draws and stuff like that. So very nice Megamaster effects here. Not only top pair, top kicker, of course, we're folding him off most of these top pair hands, as long as they don't have a backdoor flush draw to go with it. King 6, Queen 6, just pure out. These bottom pair hands as well, as long as they don't have flush draws, they're out. So yeah, very nice Megamaster effects. All right, so last spot we're going to be looking at is the button versus big blind spot again, but this time the button is covering and the big blind is covered. Again, we're going to look at a very shallow stack final table, average stack 20 big blinds. So quite high risk premiums here. So last board here we're going to look at, let's again have a quick look at risk premiums. I think that's always a good idea to keep that in mind when looking at ICM spots. Big blind here, almost 11% risk premium, button 7.5. So reasonable risk premium for both, but not massive. We can see that big blind here covered is jamming for 2.7x pot a quarter of the time. He also uses B40 sometimes, but majority sizing is just going to be all in, give me the pot right now. Again, kind of intuitive what kind of hands we're jamming. Top pairs, very attractive candidates. For bluffs, we're using quite a big mix of hands. Again, we're using some of these kind of like weakish hands, like over pairs with a gut shot, which will have very nice Megamaster effects, of course. Some like ace 6 and king 6, very popular candidates. Some stuff like these combo draws, gut shots, flush draws, stuff like that. Again, I think it's kind of interesting to see the calling range. How does our opponent react when we jam these hands? And here we can see that, again, our opponent has to fold some top pairs. Queen 8, Jack 8, mostly, or 50-50. Sometimes calling, sometimes folding, depending on suits. He has to fold ace 6 a lot. King 6 is just out. A lot of these other open-enders can only call if they have flush draws to go. Ace 6 also calls if it has backdoor flush draw, sometimes even without. A lot of these middle pairs out, all of the bottom pairs out, except for 6-5 where we have an open-ender as well. So yeah, we can see again, folding out some really strong hands with this play and kind of like taking the initiative away from our opponent. Okay, so we looked at a few scenarios where we jam the flop in ICM now, and let's talk a bit about why does this happen. As with everything in poker, there is never one simple reason to explain anything. I believe there are a couple of main reasons for this play though, and those would be the following. Maintaining stack is important and more important usually than building a stack. i.e. chips that we lose are worth more than the chips that we gain. Taking down a small pot now is better than risking losing a big pot later. We avoid getting check raised and having to fold hands with decent equity, which is a big win. We avoid scare cards on the turn or river, avoiding cards on future streets that will lower the strength of certain holdings, i.e. if you hold like pocket nines on 8-6-3. We have a really strong hand right now, but there aren't really that many safe turn cards where you can happily put more money into the pot. Lastly, we take the initiative away from our opponent and steal the fold equity, so to say. Next up, when does this happen? Usually it's on boards where equities will shift a lot on future streets. Mostly it's on low/middling flush draw boards, but even on boards like King 10-8 flush draw, I've seen it happen, although at lower frequency. I didn't find any monotone boards where this occurs, so mostly from what I could tell, it's on rainbow or flush draw boards. Usually it's also when both players have some risk premium, but not super big risk premiums. Finally, hand selection for all-in range. Usually I think the value portion is going to be quite intuitive. We use value hands in the 40 to 80% equity buckets, meaning strong hands, but not the really nutted stuff. Our bluffs are usually a bit tougher to find in my opinion. They're going to be usually hands that share cards with the big part of our value range, i.e. if it's like a 10 high board and we're shoving a lot of like jacks, queens, kings, we draw bluffs from queen jack, king queen, stuff like this. We also jam some of the big ace-x hands like ace queen off, which will typically have some pretty nice mega master effects, i.e. folding out a lot of better hands on the flop while also getting called by a few worse ones like big flush draws. High equity draws are also used in some spots. Okay, so to wrap up this video, main takeaways: why do we shove? It's an effective way to steal fold equity by taking initiative away from our opponent. With ICM, maintaining stack is often more important than building a stack. When do we do this? Usually on boards where equities will shift quite a bit on future streets, and when both players have some risk premium. What hands do we want to shove? Main value hands are going to be biggest top pairs and first over pairs. Main bluffs are going to be high cards with mega master effects and good blockers. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I know it's a lot and I didn't make this video to go very much in detail. I just wanted to illustrate that this is something that happens quite a bit. And hopefully you guys are curious now to go and learn about these spots yourself. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to learn more about ICM, you can check out this video from Stoyan Obreshkov called 5 ICM Tips to Crush Tournament Poker. See you next time.